Hi everyone, I hope you are well and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be a bit of an odd one. I'm not really sure of the structure of it or if there's going to be any structure of it. I didn't really have anything planned, and this is kind of something that I've been planning on discussing quite openly on this channel, so I thought it would be a good place to start. So it'd be quite chatty and rambly, and I don't think there's really going to be a purpose, but it's just kind of getting stuff off my chest and just like having a bit of a sounding board really. So just to give some background in case you are new here or just in case you don't know my background. So I gave birth to my first son, Rory. I say first son like I've got 50 sons. My only baby. I only have one baby, but I'm pregnant again. So I gave birth to my first baby last November, so November 2016. So I had quite a traumatic labour in the end. I really wasn't expecting it. Not that you do expect traumatic labour, but I really hadn't set myself up for it appropriately. I really was quite naive about labour. My whole pregnancy I was like, I've got no plans. I thought I was really open-minded, but obviously I think subconsciously I just hoped for the best and didn't get it. Like my labour, in hindsight, now I'm nearly a year later, I am a lot more at terms with it and stuff, but if you watch my labour and delivery story, you're just going to see me in floods of tears talking about my Cesarian, and that at the time was incredibly raw to how I was feeling. I was only a few weeks postpartum, and that is a very true reflection of how I felt about everything at the time, whilst now I can talk about it quite openly and quite happily because I've just kind of put it all to bed really. So yeah, so I first had my son last year. I had a really long labour which kind of had all, it wasn't like traumatic in the sense that like there was loads of blood or like the baby was in distress, but it was traumatic like, I don't know, just coming to terms with the aftermath, I suppose. So my waters broke on Halloween last year, and I gave birth to Rory on the 1st of November at 10:21 p.m, so 39 hours after my waters had broken. I started off really positively. My waters broke, I got called into hospital just to check everything, got told to go home, go for a walk, wait for contractions to start. If contractions didn't start, I'd be induced the next day. Contractions started pretty much straight away, maybe like, so your waters broke at 7 and I was uncomfortable with contractions to the point that like I had to go and have a bath by 11 a.m. so within 4 hours I was in pretty good place, and I just felt really positive about things were moving on, things were happening, everything was manageable, and I just thought this is going to be fine, I can do this. I like did my makeup at one point. Yeah, I was very calm, very relaxed. I think actually I was quite calm for the whole process, but at the time I was just really positive. So come 6 o'clock, all day pretty much my contractions had been every few minutes. Like I think it was it was 2 or 3 to 10 minutes, and that was the time where they were like, you need to come into hospital, and they asked me if it was unbearable, which it wasn't. So I was a little bit confused because they said what times they need to be and that it needs to be unbearable. So in my head I was like, well, I must be like 5 centimetres and dealing with it really well. I should go into hospital because I'm having the right amount of contractions, the right amount of time for when you need to go into hospital, and I don't want to give birth at home. So we went into hospital and got there, and I was only 1 centimetre dilated, and by this point I wasn't really a happy bunny with the pain. It was starting to get a little bit more intense, and I just was gutted because I was just adamant that I was further along because the pain had got so much worse and the timing. And they said to me then that I was more than welcome to stay, even though I was only 1 centimetre and you should be 4 centimetres to stay, and that my contractions were so close together because my waters are broken and sometimes that makes things quite intense. So the problem that I was having, like I was dealing with the pain just fine, it was really manageable, but it was just relentless. So like at one point, like my mum was just like, what's going on? Because one contraction would like tail off and then it would go into another one. So I just wasn't getting any rest, which was the really gutting thing. Like if it was that I was having like a minor contraction every 3-4 minutes or every 10 minutes like you were supposed to be at 1 centimetre, I would have just dealt with things a lot better, which sounds a little bit silly, but anyway. So I was really struggling with that, and I couldn't sit down or lie down, and I don't, like, it was basically to do with the fact that because my waters are broken, Rory had come down into like my pelvis a bit more than he would if my waters stayed together, and it was putting a lot of pressure on like my sciatic area, I think. I don't even know if that's true, but I think that's what they had said. So I was only comfortable to be in the bath, and I literally spent, I think, about 24 hours in the bath, because my waters broke. I went into the bath at 11 and I got out about 5 o'clock in the morning the next morning, so from 11 AM to 5 AM. Obviously I'd like come out to go to the hospital and stuff, but basically I'd pretty much spent, as soon as I got to the hospital I got back in the bath. Because it was just the only place where I could just sit comfortably, because I couldn't walk around any longer because I'd been walking around for hours, and yeah. So obviously that night, so I got into the bath from about 9 PM until 5 AM the next day. I got out every now and again to like go to the toilet, walk around, just generally bother people. Yeah, and it got painful, and like Rich would try and sleep. I'd like shut myself in the bathroom at one point so like Rich could sleep because I kind of needed him to have his energy, and I was throwing up in the pain, and I had just got it into my head that like I wasn't progressing, basically, like because I was so knocked back by the 1 centimetre. I was like, do you know what, like the next time they check me I'm gonna be pushing. Like I'm just obviously not progressing very quickly. I just felt really defeated by this point, and I know that sounds really silly, but I just felt really like gutted. Like this was, for me, was like what I'd been told to expect. So it was a really like sad 10 hours. I got really painful. I remember getting out of the bath at one point and like banging on the walls. Like Rich was still asleep, bless him. Just so I was in so much pain. I'd never known pain like it. And then when it got really bad, here's the thing as well, the pain was worse in the bath than if I got out and stood up, but the contractions were further apart, so I could sleep in between, like for 30 seconds or a minute in between contractions. But when I did have one, the pain was like so intense, it was insane. It was like boiling water being poured over me. But then if I got out of the bath and stood on the sink, the contractions weren't as bad, but they were like back to back to back pretty much. Like they'd give me a minute between them. Not even that, like I can't even remember basically, but they were like, it was intense to be out of the bath because it was just so, yeah. So Rich started timing them, and I think Rich was just like, do you know what, this has definitely progressed. And Rich has 2 children already, so I guess he kind of saw something that he's seen before. So he called out the midwife and said like, and the midwives were really like, she's fine, she's not progressing, and they'd left me in like this back room in the hospital, like that like is off the ward, so no one really came to check. So the midwives were reluctant to come and check me because they were just adamant that I wouldn't be any further along really. And I think Rich in the end was like, go and check, like just go and time her. And the midwife came in and was checking the timings, and like me visibly being in a lot more pain, and was like, oh okay, right, we'll give her a check. And obviously when your waters are broken they're a lot more reluctant to check you anyway because of the risk of infection and stuff. And then the midwife checked me. So now it's about 5 o'clock on the 1st of November, so the day is born, and she was like, oh right, no, you're 6 centimetres, you should have been having pain relief like hours ago. So she gave me gas and air, but his head was now so lodged and I was contracting on his head, and this was like the most intense pain, but it was hilarious. So like I'd have a contraction and be like, I need the epidural, I need the drugs, and then I'd calm down in between contractions of the gas and I'd be like, oh no, I think I'm fine, I can do it. Then I'd have another contraction and be like, nope, get me the drugs. So I kept on having this like argument in my own head about whether to have the epidural or not. I was like, oh, you know, I am fine between contractions, but I am very tired and I could do with the rest. And the midwife in the end was like, you're about 1 centimetre away from the epidural not happening, so if you don't make a decision now, it's not gonna happen, basically. So I was like, yeah, right, I'll take the drugs and we're gonna do that. And in the end, like, I just wanted to sleep really, and I didn't even end up sleeping. So I had the epidural, and then the classic thing happened. They said it would happen, and my labour stopped. So I had to be re-induced. So I had the epidural at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't start pushing until 7 o'clock in the evening. So it took a whole 12 hours to dilate those last 3 centimetres. So obviously by now, once I've had the epidural, my water's been broken for 24 hours. So we are now at risk of infection, but everyone was reasonably chilled about it. Like, no one really said anything. When it came to pushing, I just knew nothing was happening. I'm talking about this way too much now, but you need a recap to get the whole story. When it came to pushing, I just knew nothing was happening. I pushed for 2 hours, and I could just tell by everybody's faces, by the lack of things happening, that nothing was going on. And they kept on talking about, first of all, how the last kind of lip of my cervix wouldn't dilate, and they were trying to push it back, and they were also talking about how it felt like Rory was like coming out like this, not like this. So there was that extra pressure, and also it was putting pressure on him, if that makes sense. So I kept on having to wait for things in like half-an-hour increments for like a doctor to come, blah, 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 blah. And the doctor came in, and she was like, we are going to look into doing an assisted delivery, so an episiotomy and forceps. That for me I was fine about, even though actually in hindsight now I know, I probably would have considered more. But then I got a temperature as they were prepping that situation, which means that I had caught an infection from my waters being broken. And I think they said something like, we have like a 40-minute window before the infection passes on, and obviously if Rory got an infection, he could be in NICU, or he would be in NICU. So it was my decision to make. It wasn't really my decision. They said, we're gonna have to take you to theatre. So really quickly, like, Rich was dressed, I was signing consent forms, all of the stuff was happening, and we were whisked down to theatre. I was really calm about it, because the midwife, who had like come back on shift, she'd like left and come back, that's how long I was in labour, who knew how long I'd been there for, was like, you're gonna see your baby in the next 30 minutes. And when you've been in labour for 39 hours, you're pretty like, do you know what, that'll do me for now. Like, I just want to be done now. So I was taken down to theatre, and that was generally quite traumatic. I was really calm at first, because I just wanted to be calm for Rich and for my mum, who was also in my labour. I didn't want them to see that I was scared, because I just felt like it was already hard enough for them to watch. So I was trying to be really calm. My mum started crying, which like really hurt me, because I just felt like she probably had the emotions that I had at the time, but didn't want to, like, I didn't have the capacity to deal with it, if that makes sense. So that made me sad. And I remember thinking as well, like, I know it's quite dramatic, but I don't know if it is, I'm not sure. But as I was being wheeled down, I was like, am I supposed to say something to my mum? Like, is this really serious? Like, I've never had an operation. So I was like, do I say something? Like, am I supposed to, like, I don't know, tell her like how much she, I don't know. I just felt that was really hard to go through, which sounds really stupid, but you just think the weirdest things. Because my epidural had stopped working, it had fallen out of my back or something, I had to then have spinal once I was in theatre, which the drug makes you like really violently shake, and that's when I started to not be okay about things, because that was just, I wasn't like upset that I was shaking, but when you're about to have surgery and you're shaking, I didn't realise, I thought I was like nervous or cold, and it took them like until I was halfway through the surgery to be like, oh no, that's normal. But I was like trying to stop myself shaking, because I thought, well, surely they would rather I didn't shake, because they're trying to cut my tummy open and I'm shaking, like I was literally like this, like it was crazy. Like Richard, the bed was moving, I was shaking that much. So I had that in my mind the whole time. I also had it in my mind that my epidural had worn off, so I was really scared that the spinal was going to wear off, which was again a really silly thing to think. And then because I've been in labour for so long and I was shaking, I was just exhausted, and by the time Rory was born I was pretty much gone, like I was out of it, and I just wanted to pass out and sleep. And they wanted to give me Rory, I didn't want to hold him because I was too tired. When he came out, I remember thinking like, he's stunning, like I still remember thinking he looks like an angel, but I just didn't feel anything. I was so past it. Yeah, it was horrible. I really hate I felt that way. And then what was I gonna say? I've lost my train of thought already. And then when I went to the recovery room, my mum's there, my stepdad's there, there's nurses, midwives, anaesthetists, Rich there, and that was the time where I was going to hold Rory for the second time, because they had really quickly given him to me whilst I was still in surgery, but I was just like, I can't hold him, I don't have the strength. So there's a lot of people watching you, waiting for your first reaction with your baby, and that also didn't really, it was a lot of pressure to show a lot of emotion when you weren't really feeling it, if that makes sense. Like, I just wanted everyone to go, and I wanted to sleep and eat something because I was starving, and I just wanted to like be on my own with my new baby so I could deal with him and just take him in myself. Obviously there's only so much you can deal with because you are in high recovery now and you can't move, so the midwives are doing everything for your baby, which I also found quite hard to deal with. And then I found the general Cesarian recovery the most horrendous thing in the world. Like, it pretty much ruined the first 3 weeks with my baby. I couldn't sit up in bed. He was in a Moses basket originally here, and he would spit out his dummy and then be unsettled at night time, and I couldn't even like put his dummy back in his mouth. I just felt so useless, and that was horrible. And the recovery is the thing that puts me off ever having another Cesarian. I also think, yeah, basically that's the whole story. But the reason I wanted to do this video today, I'm really conscious of how long this video already is, but the reason I wanted to do this video today is to talk about my second labour. So I am due next February with my second baby, and I have so far opted to have a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after Cesarian, which means that you basically attempt to have a normal birth after a Cesarian, but you are obviously at a higher risk of having Cesarian. I don't know if I've got wonky pipes, so I might never be able to have a natural birth, you just don't know. I don't know if it was just bad luck on that day. And yeah, I wanted to talk about that really because I am in two minds as to why I think it would be a good idea. I really want to have a vaginal birth because I feel like the reason I've come so to terms with my Cesarian is because I know that there is an option to have a second delivery the way I hoped to. Even if it doesn't go to plan, I still have that control factor that it could happen how I wanted it originally, and if it doesn't go to plan, then at least I tried. Like, I still have that, I have that in my head, like, so I'm over my last Cesarian because I've got a second chance basically to give it my best, and I know the risks, I know what could happen, and I know what went wrong last time, so it's like having that second chance, which really motivates me and helps me feel good about things, and I'm just really excited and I have a really good feeling about having a VBAC. On the other hand, I don't know, I just feel like, am I just being a martyr? Like, am I just taking it upon myself to have a natural delivery? And is it really not actually the best thing to do for myself, my baby, my family, blah, 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 blah. Like, am I just doing it for like personal props, if that makes sense? And I don't know if I'm just a little bit blinkered into thinking that VBAC is best, and actually maybe a Cesarian's the most logical and smart thing to do considering what happened the first time round, and that could happen again. There's pros about having a Cesarian. I would know exactly when my baby's going to be delivered. It makes life a lot easier with Rory because I can give him to, like, he'll go to my mum's when I deliver, and I will know that he'll be there for 24 hours, and then hopefully I will be home to have him back. I can be way more organised in that sense as opposed to my water's breaking and having to deal with him and just blah, 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 blah. So for that sense, it makes a lot more sense. Rich doesn't really want me to go through a traumatic labour again, and neither do I. And I've heard loads of good things about elective Cesarians being a way better experience. I've seen really beautiful elective Cesarians. I've heard about people recovering better. But I've also heard about people not recovering better. I've either heard about people recovering worse or the same. And then I think, well, it's not worth it then, surely. Like, I would much rather have a natural birth and be back on my feet a few days later. I know that's not always the way, but with a Cesarian, I was like just knocked for 3 weeks at least. And I was really poorly afterwards. I had loads and loads of like contraindications afterwards from it. So yeah, and lots of people will say like the second time around you heal quicker, and in hindsight, with my first cesarean, I healed within 3 weeks, not the 6 weeks that you're told you will. So I did heal really, really well, considering, but those first 3 weeks were still horrible. Like, they could have been 3 days and it was still one of the worst times of my life. I know that sounds really dramatic, but if you've had a cesarean and it wasn't what you wanted, you will 100% understand what I'm talking about. And I think you have to have been there to get it. Like, just to feel like, I don't know, I just felt so gross, so much pain. Like, I've never known pain like it in cesarean recovery. Like, it's horrendous, the pain. Like, I know not everybody has that, but for me it was a really painful recovery. And just to not feel like myself and not feel like I could look after my baby was heartbreaking. Like, I know that sounds really stupid, but it was soul destroying. Like, I just couldn't do it. Like, and I just, yeah, I felt really useless for a long time. And it definitely knocked my first stint into motherhood. I am also going to be in the 2 under 2 market, so that's already going to be quite a scary time, and I don't feel like I need any other pressure on that as the start of that journey. I don't need that same bad taste in my mouth from a cesarean. Also, my other reason for really wanting to have a VBAC is that I will still have to lift my first baby, who will be 15 months old, after labour, because even if he is walking, I don't think he'll be walking very well, and he will still need carrying, putting in his pushchair, putting in his cot, all those things. I know obviously I will have help, but I would just much rather he not be too affected, because like, I'm pretty much Rory's world, and I feel like if I suddenly couldn't pick him up, that would be quite confusing for him. So yeah, those are my thoughts at the moment. I'm not gonna I'm gonna do loads and loads of videos on this VBAC thing, so I just want to give you my original thoughts and to hear yours. If you've had a VBAC, or if you've had an elective cesarean, then let me know what you think. If you've had any form of cesarean, let me know how you dealt with it, and just let me know your thoughts on the situation. That'd be great. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and please subscribe and stick around for more pregnancy updates, VBAC updates, life updates, everything like that. But I will see you in the next one. Bye!